Hello, my name is Simran Hans. I'm a film critic for The Observer and a writer. I'm very happy to be chairing today's panel, My Big Break. Hopefully, it will give any filmmakers in the room, or should I say in the Zoom, a chance to kind of hear the stories and insights of people who have actually kind of made it and broken through in the industry. The aim of today's talk is really to demystify and also democratize, the process of how do you get your work made, how do you get it seen. Um, I'm very excited to be doing this digitally. It's a real shame that DocFest couldn't happen in person in the same way this year. So it's really great that it's happening in an online format. I've got a brilliant panel of filmmakers. I'm going to introduce them in just a moment, but I just wanted to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Today's panel is in partnership with BAFTA, so thank you to them. I'm gonna read you the official DocFest introduction, which is that we want everyone joining us for this online edition of DocFest to have a great experience, and so therefore we kindly ask of everyone attending to be respectful of all the other participants and panelists. The DocFest team will be moderating the chat, so we're going to make sure it's going to be a harassment-free space. There will be an opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. You can use the Q&A function. We'll do our best to answer those throughout the question. And yeah, for the panelists, you don't have to worry about those questions. I will feed them through to you. It's very it's very new to be kind of doing this on Zoom. I've been doing it throughout the last however many months of this pandemic it's been, and it still feels a kind of strangely intimate way to do it. But that intimacy, I think, will make for a really productive conversation. Like I said, we've got a brilliant panel of filmmakers, producers, artists. So I'm going to go through everybody one by one. If you can give me a wave if I'm talking about you, that would be good for our panelists. You can also see your names, but would also probably like to wave at you virtually. We have Catherine Hart, who is a London-based Irish director who completed an MA in documentary at the NFTS in documentary directing, where she was tutored by Kim Longinotto and Sean McAllister. Prior to that, she moved to the UK to do an MA in visual anthropology, and her NFTS graduation doc, Professional Foreigner, premiered at DocFest in 2017. In 2017, she also directed a short documentary for BBC4 and the BFI called Accents Speak Louder Than Words, about a Polish woman who takes elocution lessons to sound more British. So you can sense the theme developing here. And Catherine has been drawn to these ideas of the culture clash and the immigrant experience and people's different perspectives and perceptions of each other. You could describe her films as intimate and candid and funny as well. Her first feature documentary, Faith and Branko, is playing in the DocFest selection. And she also works as a DV director for TV broadcasters such as the BBC and Channel 4. So that's Catherine. We have Ashley Francis Roy, who in 2019 was the winner of Channel 4's prestigious First Cup pitch. And he was also accepted onto the highly competitive BBC New Documentary Directors Scheme. Within the past year, he's filmed, produced and directed 2 acclaimed single films for Channel 4 and is now working with Story Films on an exciting documentary series. He grew up in Leeds and studied music before working in TV, and started his career as a trainee in BBC Factual for a year on a competitive traineeship that was funded by a brilliant scheme called Creative Access. He's worked on a wide range of productions, from art series to observational docs, and his first broadcast film for Channel 4 followed 3 young children growing up on the Isle of Dogs. His forthcoming film for Channel 4 explores the impact of Damilola Taylor's death and the impact that it had on the community around him. And that film is called Damilola, the Boy Next Door, which is playing in this autumn on Channel 4, I believe. We also have Dan Guthrie, who's an artist and filmmaker and a programmer as well, currently based in Gloucestershire, and his work explores the multiplicities of Black Britishness. Recent screenings of his work include Current Transmissions at the ICA in London and Frames Within Frames at Obsidian Coast, and he's previously programmed events for London Short Film Festival and Sight Festival. We have Augustina Comedi, who is the director of Playback, which is playing in the DocFest programme. And she studied modern literature, trained as a screenwriter, and in 2017, her film Silence is a Falling Body premiered worldwide at IDFA, where it received, among other awards, the Silver Condor for Best Documentary Film in 2019. In 2019, Playback also won awards, the Teddy Award at the Berlinale and Best Short Film at the Mar del Plata International Film Festival. And last but definitely not least, we have the producer of Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone If You're a Girl, Elena Andrzejeva. Have I said your name right, Elena? I should have checked that with you. She's given me the thumbs up. Or she can correct me later. Elena's an Oscar and BAFTA winning producer and filmmaker working across documentaries that fuse personal stories with powerful journalism. She's produced work on hard-hitting and hard-access topics, including incarceration with a 12-year-old lifer, the war on drugs, Drugs Incorporated, human trafficking, Saving the Cybersex Girls, and the Oscar-winning Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone If You're a Girl. Her directorial debut, Polish Go Home, looked at the immigration crisis in Britain through the eyes of a Polish family, and she's currently directing a film for the BBC about a prodigious swimmer from the Gaza Strip, developing a slate of features. So we've got a lot of talent on this panel, and I think it's really interesting that you all come from like quite different perspectives and backgrounds as well, and your sort of respective big breaks have kind of been through a variety of different channels. You know, some of you have come up through traditional kind of film school, others have been through kind of institutional schemes, you know, not everybody has had the same journey, and I'm really interested to kind of go into a bit of detail about each of your trajectories. I think what the best thing to do would be is if I talk to each of you and kind of we go through everybody's story, we see a clip from their work, and then we'll have a broader conversation where everybody can kind of chime in a bit more, and then there'll be a chance for questions from the audience. So if you've got questions, have a think. They might be answered already, feed them through, and you know, we'll make sure we save some time for that at the end. I want to start with Catherine. So if you could unmute yourself, Catherine, thank you. My kind of question for everybody, and I'll ask you guys individually, is really to kind of ask what you see as your own first big break, because in any career you have, you know, highs and lows and moments that open doors, but I really want to hear about the first thing that really kind of set you on your path to where you are now.
Is that me first then?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. When you say the first thing, I don't really know what to say, because I feel like it was cumulative and lots of mini breaks.
Yes, but the panel's called The Big Break.
Yeah, the big break. I don't know if I've had a big break yet. Lots of mini breaks which lead towards things. And it's hard to say which was the most significant. But I think if I had to choose one, probably for me, it was going to NFTS, the film school. Because before then, I was kind of doing a bit of everything. I worked as an editor for a while. I had worked as an AP, and I was making my own film, but I didn't really know how to finish it. Because it was such the film which is at DocFest, Faith and Branco, it took many years to make, and it was unfolding, and I didn't know how it would end. And I would just spend time cutting scenes and making tasters, but I didn't really know how to finish it. So I think going to NFTS really helped me in terms of structure and learning how the business works. All of the things which don't come naturally to me, I learned there. So I would say that was probably my turning point, and everything after that just kind of made more sense.
So
yeah.
For those who haven't seen Faith and Branco, can you describe the sort of basic storyline of it? It's such a kind of touching and fun documentary. I really liked it. But yeah, if you can describe it to everybody, and then we'll have the clip after you've summarized it.
Yeah, so it's basically a love story, a cross-cultural love story between an English musician and a Serbian Roma musician. And I met them at a music school in Serbia and just happened to be there when they fell in love. And I filmed it, and I ended up following them. I filmed their wedding, some family opposition, and then their decision to move to England to make it as musicians. So it's basically about the dynamics of their relationship, but also their kind of how they see hope in each other, you know, to have a better life.
Let's have the clip, please. I love how you include him saying that he thinks that Ireland's better than England.
I know. It's so silly, but I was looking back at that thinking I was kind of new to England at that point as well. I mean, I think when I filmed that, I had been living in the UK for just over 2 years. So I was kind of still at the point where I could feel more what it was like to be an outsider. So we could kind of relate in some way, even though it's so much closer culturally, but you know, there's still differences.
Oh, I don't disagree with the statement.
Yeah. Bad aliens.
I'm really kind of interested to hear a little bit more about the journey to the first feature, because this is your feature debut. You've obviously made short films before and worked in TV as well. How did the kind of transition work for you?
It was something that was always going in the back burner. So it was kind of like happening at the same time as me working in TV and studying. So, and I think I always knew it would become a feature. Because I knew it would it would take years to unfold. And so, yeah, I don't know if the shorts didn't come first for me, actually. Faith and Branco came first. It was my first project. And it came from I did a master's in visual anthropology. And I actually wrote about this music school where they met. It was about Romani culture and teaching gypsy style music, and if non-gypsies could pick that up. And, you know, so that was that study. And then I went back the following year to make a film. And then it became Faith and Branco. But this is ongoing. Like, I started making it in 2011. So even before I had any job in TV or went to film school, I had started making this.
I think that's the first sort of myth of what it means to be a filmmaker already kind of challenged, that there's like a very obvious trajectory that you make X number of short films, they travel to festivals, you get funding to make your first feature, it travels to festivals, and there's a kind of straightforward trajectory. It's interesting to me that you already had started working on this and that you continued to do it while you were studying, while you were working, because you know, as we are all perfectly aware with the kind of the rhetoric that is coming out of the government at the moment, you know, artists should be retraining, when really artists are continuing to kind of work to support themselves alongside making their art as well. I think that's very kind of important to highlight, that you've been working on this rather than kind of waiting for a perfect time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, when I was just thinking about the term big break, it's somehow it implies, I don't know if I'm right in this, but I feel like it sounds like an instant leg up. And in my experience, it really wasn't like that. It was lots of work and lots of patience, and being rejected. Like, I didn't get funding instantly. It took we had to try 3 times before we got funding. And that was from Serbia, not from the UK. But probably because most of the filming at that point had been in Serbia, they were the best. It was the best port of call. So yeah, it wasn't instant. And I think maybe the other thing which helped me get funding was probably that I had at that point made a short film or 2 at that point. So maybe actually you do need the short films in order for somebody to know and trust you to make something. Because I think unless it's really special access or a unique story, which is very important and very relevant, then funding bodies need to see proof. That's my experience anyway. So I think the short films did help.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's move on to Ashley.
Hello.
Hello. Would you like to talk about the clips that we have for Damilola first? And then maybe that gives people a kind of context into the kind of project it is, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, of course. So we've got a couple of clips to show you today from a film which I've been working on for the past year, and which is going out on Channel 4 in a couple of weeks, 28th of October at 9 o'clock. And it's a film presented by someone called Yinka Bikini, who works as a DJ and presenter. And she grew up in South London in a place called the North Peckham Estate, which at the time was quite a notorious kind of housing estate in London. And it was also the place where Damilola Taylor lived and was killed in 2000. And so the film that we've made for Channel 4 kind of tries to explore the impact of Damilola's death on Yinka and the community, and kind of tell the story behind the headlines. And Yinka in the film, she meets people who she grew up with and who knew Damilola, and kind of sits with the pain of what happened, and kind of for the first time really in her life kind of confronts it.
Let's have let's start with the clip of Yinka as a little girl, and then we'll chat a bit first before the other clip, if that's all right. So in that clip, she's kind of talking about you know, her experiences as a child, really, and what's so incredible about this film is not just the access that you have, but also this archive that's set against the kind of contemporary rememberings of what happened. And, you know, you have the young Yinka kind of like reflecting on what had happened in the aftermath for another documentary, and sort of seeing her interact with that footage is incredible. It seems like this film is kind of coming out at a moment at which it could be sort of quite impactful, sort of not that it wouldn't be before, or that the story is somehow more relevant now than it would have been a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. But I think people are really keen to hear stories that haven't been told, or haven't been told kind of from the most generous perspective, shall we say. And it seems like this film could really be a turning point in your career. But I wonder if you have an idea of what you see as your own big break up until this point.
Well, I think so. When I started in television about 6 years ago now, and like fairly early on, I became quite focused on wanting to make my own films and direct, and that can be quite hard. I think in TV it can take a bit of time, and you kind of have to wake your way up and be a researcher and an assistant producer and get lots of experience first, which is, you know, really valuable and good. But often getting your kind of first opportunity as a director can be quite challenging. And I was really lucky in some senses, because last year I at Sheffield won Channel 4's first cut pitch, and the kind of prize for that pitch is your first film for Channel 4. And so in many ways that was kind of obviously my kind of big break, and kind of helped me, gave me that first opportunity as a director, which is often really, really challenging to get. And since then, you know, I've directed this other film for Channel 4. So that really has kind of set me going as a director, which was an amazing opportunity. But then I kind of look at another point in my career, which I think is kind of like a kind of bigger turning point, and kind of probably almost helped me get here more. And that was I kind of started working on arts and music documentaries, and I think in sometimes in TV especially, you can kind of get kind of typecast into like little worlds and genres. You know, you make music films, you make entertainment, you make game shows, and I was loving making these films, but started seeing and understanding that I wanted to make more kind of documentaries about people and social issues, and kind of stepping across to that kind of part of the documentary world was a bit of a challenge. And there was a kind of moment where I had to kind of, you know, say no to any job offers that were for films about that kind of subject, and really kind of stick to this kind of thing that I wanted to do. And in the end, I ended up talking to an exec producer and telling them what I wanted to do. And it was that producer that kind of gave me an opportunity eventually on a kind of documentary series, which in many senses, like, I wasn't, the most experienced, ideal candidate for, but he obviously kind of saw, took a chance and thought that I could do a good job. And that in a way was a bigger turning point, because it kind of opened up this whole world for me. And there was a moment where it was really slow, and it took a long time to kind of make that turning point, but it was worth it. And I often like try and kind of say to people that if you focus on what you want to do and try to kind of decide what you want to do and focus on it and head there, then that's like a really good kind of approach, and telling people what you want to do as well, and people kind of help you get there, I think.
In terms of kind of striking that relationship with that executive producer, when you say you told them what you wanted to do, maybe you can like tell any filmmakers that are listening a little bit more about that interaction. Like, how well did you know them? Was it sort of reaching out via an email? Did you go for a drink with them? Sort of at what point or sort of how solid was that relationship when you started to tell them about your ambitions? Because clearly you must have had to show a bit of vulnerability and kind of, clarity about what you wanted without necessarily asking for something directly, because you don't know what someone might be able to offer you. So if you can talk a little bit about that I think would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. I think I don't really even remember the first time that I met this particular person, but I probably just emailed them at some point and said, I really like the work that your company makes. I'd love to talk to you and see if we could maybe do anything in the future. And I might have had a meeting with them at some point, like really on in my career, and then nothing came of it, and I went off and did other stuff. And I think it's good to try and stay in touch with people. And I always try and, if I, even when I was like an assistant producer or researcher, when I'd like finished on something and it went out on telly, I would try and tell people that I'd been connected with. It's just as a way of kind of staying in touch with someone and kind of keeping kind of relationships alive. And so I think that just helps. I think just staying in touch with people. And then I think eventually I got to this point where I kind of decided that I really wanted to work on, these kind of programs. And we went for another coffee, and I said, it'd be great to catch up and see what you've got going on and tell you a bit what I've been up to. And then I think in terms of kind of just being honest with people, like you can just, often people will ask you like, well, what do you want to do? What is it that you want to do next? Where do you want to go? And sometimes you get asked that question and you realize you haven't really thought about it, and you don't really have an idea. But if you can say to someone, I really want to be directing films in 4 years, or like I've been doing music films, but I really want to be doing this. The people really, I think, appreciate it when you give them a sense of clarity about what it is you want to do. And if they like you and think that you have potential to kind of be good, then they'll more often than not like want to help you. And like when it might not be immediately, but when eventually something comes up, then they'll remember that and kind of bear you in mind for it. And that's what happened. Like when from that conversation to the documentary series coming up, it was like another 6 months. So it wasn't like an immediate thing, but it paid off kind of over that time. So
it's so kind of interesting to see the patterns that emerge from kind of talking about everyone's different stories and journeys, that you can have the support of the institution, but sometimes that can open one door, but it doesn't open enough doors. Or you can it's so dependent on relationships as well. And I think like something like DocFest in its kind of purest and most original iteration is a party festival where a bunch of people who really care about the truth and about nonfiction can kind of get together and meet each other. And it's it's interesting to kind of think about how we make those connections and maintain them when we can't all kind of physically be in the same space. I want to move on to Augustina. Your trajectory and your journey is different because you grew up in Argentina, right?
That's so. difference.
Yeah, so you haven't come up through the kind of institutions and channels based in the UK. So I'm really interested to hear about what you see as your kind of first big break or kind of turning point in your career.
Okay. Well, in my case, I studied literature, so the first thing I did was a feature film. Like I've never been through like short films. Like I did it afterwards, so it's a little bit like strange the path. And I did it at the beginning almost everything like by myself and with friends. I think that a big difference between doing films in the south and probably in the north is that like we have to really like friends or nets support us. Like there are some things you can't get with money because we don't have any money to do films. So maybe we like can I don't know, yeah, like relate with people, and that makes the difference. It's like a kind of getting resources. So
can you tell people a little bit more about how you made your first film? Because I think it's fascinating that you studied literature, not filmmaking, and then you go on to be a director without going to any kind of film school or anything like that. Can you tell us about the sort of people that you worked with and how you made that first film?
Yes. Well, I was living in a sailboat with my baby and my couple, and I realized that I needed like to do a film. Like I was like very clear on that. So I left that happy life to come back to Argentina and deal with films that sometimes it's happy and sometimes it's terrible. Like I think that we all agree in that. And well, my father was he was an activist. He died when I was 12 years old, and after a while, I realized that he was also like a queer person. So, but that when he married, he put his past life on secret, like nothing to do with that. So I came back here and I met his friends. They were all like gays and lesbians, and they all participated in political parties. Before, when they were young, they had to exile. They were persecuted by military government, and well, I started relating with them. I found my father's shootings. He had some amateur like films and family album, not like professional film. And well, I decided to do a film with that. That's basically everything. Like my friends support me and we started doing it together. Anyway, like that's a part of it. Like I think that helped. But actually I got a distributor after a while. Like the film started like it started at IDFA because I had some.
So let's just pause for a second, because your film gets into IDFA. That can really like help to sort of cement you as a serious filmmaker getting into a festival like that. If your background was not in films really, and you know, you kind of came to that a bit later, who were the people that kind of helped you learn about festivals and learn that you should be submitting your film to IDFA and that's where you could get a distributor and stuff?
Well, that was because IDFA like supported the film by Bertha Fund. I had the support of Bertha Fund before, so they asked for the film.
So it was through the funding channels and kind of getting funding for that film that you were able to kind of.
Yeah, but it was a very short like development trip. It was not a very big one, like just Berta found and some Argentinian founds. Yes, I think that opens afterwards some
some doors.
Windows, yeah.
Can we have the clip for the trailer of Playback, which is your more recent film? Can you play the clip, please? So if you could tell people about the kind of what happened after you made Silence is a Falling Body, and kind of how you then made Playback. If you could talk about that transition a bit, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, in like in the practical
yeah, well, I guess sorry, that's my fault for not phrasing it clearly enough. I guess what I'm saying is that with Silence is a Falling Body, you'd sort of been to IDFA and you'd won the award there, and so people kind of knew who you were, and that film could be a calling card for you. And I'm curious to know how that first film helped you to then make the second film.
Yeah, it was well, I think that when I got Kino Rebelde is my distributor, we did, that came afterwards. Like we met, I met Maria and she loved the film and she decided to support it. So like I had no money and it was like, okay, let's do this. And she started helping me because I didn't know where to send it. And I spent a lot of money, like paying fees for festivals and stuff. It was not like, it was going to be a disaster. And she decided to support me and support the film. And we started a very long journey. Like Silence is a Falling Body, still going to festivals now after like 4 years, like 3 years. So it was like small festivals, but through a very long period of time. And with Playback, she started working with me before I sent it to the first festival. So like she decided where to send it, how to send it since the beginning. So I think that the path of Playback was very like successful. We went to Mar del Plata, we won there. That was the national premiere, and then the international premiere was at Berlinale, and like we have the fortune to win a prize, so that makes it a lot easier. Like, but with Silence, sorry, just once Silence is a Falling Body had another, like it happened another thing that it was like in cinemas inside the country that was very nice, that we went with one copy, just one, but the film stayed all the time playing in cinemas for like 7 months. Wow. So that was, but just with one copy. If we went outside with like 10 copies, it would be like 1 week probably. So that was another good decision, I think.
I think it's really interesting that for you, there was somebody who could kind of see your talent as a filmmaker and to believe in you and had a vision for how to kind of like get that out there and how best to show the film. I think, you know, having a producer or a distributor or you know, somebody that you're working closely with that can support you is so important. And you know, building it's what we said before, you know, building those relationships and finding the people who are going to champion you seems to be really crucial in kind of, you know, taking the opportunity that you get with any kind of big break and using that and turning that into something else. Let's move to Dan. Your journey is kind of slightly different because you are also, as well as being a filmmaker, you're a curator and you've been in the gallery space, often programming other people's works and kind of putting other people's projects on, I guess, on screen or in the gallery space. But you're also a filmmaker yourself. Which way round did that kind of happen for you?
So I started off as a filmmaker, I guess. I made a film in 2018 with a Arts Council funded scheme called First Acts with Channel 4. And then that was fun, but it kind of got to the point where I realized that I couldn't necessarily always make films at that scale and with that funding. So I kind of tried taking a different approach to exploring what I wanted to explore, which was through programming. So I guess that came after, but I wasn't really aware programming was a thing until I'd made a film and tried to get into festivals. So it was kind of I wouldn't have done programming if I didn't know that filmmaking was a thing to begin with.
And I guess maybe it might be interesting for us to kind of see your two films, because they're very short, back to back. And I think if we can have Albion Refreshed first, I believe that's one of the clips.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the second one play straight after, if that's okay.
Cool.
Thank you. So I should have said that this film, Albion Refreshed, and we actually don't have a clip for Three Young Men on a Bench, which is fine. I would encourage people to check it out though if they get a chance. Is that Albion Refreshed is not the same film that came out of the Random Acts First Act scheme. This one is the one that you did with the ICA.
Yes.
New Creatives.
Sorry. I should have clarified. So the one I made ages ago was called Seven Stages with Channel 4. And this is the new one. Yeah. But
it's interesting that this film has also kind of come through the sort of channel of Arts Council funding, which is one way to make a film. And I guess the reason why I sort of wanted to talk about it in comparison with Three Young Men on a Bench is because that short film is self-funded.
Yeah, I mean, when I say self-funded, I mean there was no funding. So, yeah.
Yes, it's called being made independently.
Yeah.
And so there are different. I'm interested to kind of hear a little bit about your journey with those short films, because I think maybe for some filmmakers there is an expectation of you can only make a certain type of film if you have a certain amount of money, and I really love the creativity of this independently made film, sort of for me sort of sitting at the same level as the funded pieces. And I'm interested to kind of hear about your choice to make a film without a traditional funding setup.
Yeah, so I made the Channel 4 Random Acts film that came out in March 2018, and the film that I made, Three Young Men on a Bench, I made that in September 2018. So there was kind of a few months of me going, it was really cool that I got funding that time, but I don't know how to get funding again. And they got to a point where I realized that I just had to sort of accept the fact that I might not get funding again and just go out and shoot it. So a lot of it is I teamed up with someone that I met doing that funding scheme, who shot it all on her VHS camera. And a lot of it was just working with what I had already. So it features a lot of shots of clothing, which meant I didn't have to, get actors in or anyone like that. And it was just sort of working with what resources I had. So there's a voiceover of my uncle, and because he's my uncle, I could get him for free, and I was very nice to do it off the back of a night shift. So it was just sort of really embracing what I had around me and the skills that I'd learned from the previous film and sort of applying that in a new way.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. After you.
No, that's it.
I was just going to say, like, if you could tell people a little bit more about First Acts, does it still exist anymore?
So First Acts First Acts was with Channel 4, and that sort of evolved into BBC New Creatives, which I think is still running, but I'm not entirely sure. but essentially it was this scheme where you could you could pitch them an idea quite simply. Like it was a paragraph about your idea, a paragraph about yourself, and then they pair you up with like a producer, and they give you money, which is always a good thing to get a film made, and they sort of give you the resources that you need to make a film, which is great. So when I did the first film, I'd never made a film before, and I was still in college, and I'd never thought about making a film. But then I think I got a well-timed Facebook advert that said, have you never made a film before and want to make a film? And that's kind of how that started. So
that's so brilliant that, you know, seeing something, having someone or something reach out to you when you didn't necessarily imagine that path for yourself, that feels so kind of serendipitous.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the middle of writing an essay, and I was looking on Facebook and I saw the ads, and it was a good bit of procrastination, I think. So
and with, in terms of that first acts scheme, do you feel that it sort of cemented this idea of you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't. It's weird looking back at the film because it's very different to what I've done since, but it definitely gave me the skills to do it and the sort of confidence in myself to know that I could make a film. So I don't think I would have made Three Young Men on a Bench if it wasn't for the first act scheme. I didn't have that confidence sort of put into me, I guess.
I want to move on to Elena, and then we'll sort of talk a little bit more broadly among all of us. Elena, can you tell us a little bit about your first big break?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this earlier, and sort of similarly to what Catherine said, it's hard to pin it down. Obviously, you could say being asked to produce Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone if you're a girl is, you know, it's pretty big break. But yeah, just sort of going back a bit further to a place where sort of that helped me be in that position, you know, in the first place. So I started out in TV in a sort of a fairly standard way. I was doing some running, some researching, some assistant producing, that sort of thing, and working on lots of different programs that were interesting, but not exactly what I wanted to do. And so a lot of factual TV, doing things about engineering, and, you know, not to kind of be down on those things, but I was more interested in working on, you know, documentaries, looking at social issues. So that was kind of my big goal. And I just felt I just wasn't getting there. And I was quite frustrated, really. And then I finally managed to kind of get a few jobs like that, and I was very excited. And then I went for an interview with a brilliant director called Zara Hayes for a film called 12-Year-Old Lifer. And this is in 2012, so a little while back. And she said to me, well, you know, I'm not going to hire you to do the sort of the friendly girl AP act on this. You know, this is a film that's got really tough access, but you know, we need to maintain these relationships. Sort of, she went on and explained about, you know, how she felt she wanted to try and do this film differently. And I did end up getting the job and trying not to do the dance, the act. And I think meeting her and working with somebody like that was a big game changer for me, in that it was really empowering. And I sort of, throughout that production, I felt the quality of my work really go up. I think because you know, I was given a lot of responsibility, but also told, look, you don't need to get this access at any cost or do this at any cost. You have to be very kind of authentic to yourself as a person and a, you know, a filmmaker, and relate to this project kind of in a human, serious way, not just sort of tick a box, you know, get your credit. And that had a really profound impact on me. So I think that kind of set me up, and it's something I have to remind myself every time I take on a new project.
So really for you, the sort of the big break was an opportunity that you're given to really prove yourself and to properly learn. It sounds like that was a really formative experience. How did you guys connect initially?
I had been I'd been doing some work for a production company that that had secured the commission for this director, and honestly, I didn't think I would be anywhere near in the running for it. But they asked me, they asked me for the meeting, and there it was. It was so yeah, I guess it was a break in that respect for sure. But yeah, I think also just the other point to make is that I think the way it helped was that also, sometimes you get given a lot of responsibility, but it's kind of not real. Whereas, I was able to grow.
What do you mean by it's not real?
So going back to the issue of sort of getting access on films, dealing with difficult subjects. Sometimes you're making a film that's quite quick, in and out. So you can go in, you can quickly sort of strike a relationship, film it, go away. This was going to be, over three shoots over 6 months. So I knew you can't just kind of do it like that. And the responsibility was really nurturing that, and again, sort of being really kind of being, I guess. Yeah, I think it's just harder, as I'm sure you all know, to maintain those relationships over a longer period of time, and knowing that that's on your shoulders,
For sure. In terms of learning to skateboard, which is, I guess, like another turning point in your career, we could say, because of the massive success of that film, and I do think it's brilliant. I saw it at the start of the year. I'm interested to hear a little bit about that project and how you got involved in that.
Sure. So I'd been doing a bit of work with Grain Media, who were the production company who made the film. Grain Media are known for, originally Virunga, which is a fantastic film about the Virunga National Park, and had done really well, Oscar nominated, and then White Helmets and lots of other really good projects. So when I was connected with them by the same director, actually, who I mentioned before, Zara Hayes, I thought, okay, brilliant, I'll try and do some work with them and see what comes of that. So I'd actually ended up doing a project that wasn't exactly up my street, but was with this production company, because I thought, well, it's a kind of a good way of showing we can work together, and when something comes along that's that's very exciting, perhaps they'll consider me, and that's exactly what happened.
Can we have a clip from the film, please? So apologies for the subtitles issue there, and not being able to kind of read what the girls are saying. However, I do think it's testament to the strength of the filmmaking that you still get such a sense of the storytelling and the emotion and the kind of journey of what's happening, even without having the subtitles in that instance. I think this would be a good, because we don't have loads of time. I think this would be a good way to kind of transition into a kind of conversation that involves everybody, because I'm sure everyone has opinions on this, and if there are anybody and if there is anybody watching who wants to send in a question, do feel free to send those through, and don't feel shy. We're an intimate group today, but I wanted to kind of ask you about the sort of awards and festival success that a lot of you have kind of enjoyed in your careers, and kind of think about what role a festival plays in a filmmaker or a producer's career. And maybe Elena, you can start, because this film has done really well, and I'm interested to kind of for filmmakers watching to be able to learn a little bit about sort of how a festival can put you on the map, but then also what you do with that. you know, is it enough to premiere at a festival, to win an award, or to have your work exhibited in a gallery or whatever, you know, or to win a pitch? You know, once you've got that under your belt, then what? How do you use that? And once Elena has kind of given her piece on that, feel free to just chime in, anyone, or stick your hand up first and I'll call you, and then you can unmute to save a free for all.
So with learning to skateboard in a war zone if you're a girl, we'd spent quite a long time making the film, and the edit took quite a long time. And so basically, to cut a long story short, by the time, you know, the festival process started, and by that I mean submissions and kind of plans, I think we were kind of in a bit of a funk and a tricky place, as I'm sure all filmmakers will recognize. And so when we were selected to show at Tribeca, and that was the premiere, it was really exciting, obviously, because it's a great festival, but also quite scary. But you know, I remember being in that auditorium with Carol Dysinger, the director, and we hadn't seen the film with an audience properly. You know, it'd been ages, and we screened it as part of a handful of shorts, and we were so excited. You know, we'd gone from being a bit like, this is going to be amazing, to, oh, I don't know, is this all right, to, oh, all of these people seem to think it's great. And that I think kind of reinvigorated our enthusiasm for the film and all the promotion that it would need. And in addition to that, some days later, the film won the Best Short Doc at Tribeca, which was obviously amazing. But I think also just for us and the whole team to then give you the impetus to keep going, because it can be quite a long process, as Agustina was saying. I think festivals are amazing because how often are our films screened publicly to large groups of people? I mean, often they're on television, and that's brilliant too, but you can't share that experience. So that's a unique perspective and for our particular project.
Does anyone else want to chime in with their experiences of festivals and sort of, you know, how important that is as part of your journey? Yeah, Catherine.
Well, in terms of like having a film at a festival, it's still early stages for me because Sheffield was the world premiere of my film, and it's going to Doc Leipzig next, but I can't really give the same kind of anecdotes that Elena gave. But just in terms of going to festivals as a person who doesn't have a film there, I think I made a lot of very valuable friendships at film festivals. And similar to what Ashley said earlier, kind of making contacts with producers, fellow filmmakers, people who in the end I might have met at a party, gave me a job as an AP. So maybe it's not the question you asked, but I'm just saying going to film festivals, whether you have a film or not, is really valuable. And yeah, I can't really say anything about how it is to have a film at a festival because this year is very unusual. And I haven't even had, we haven't had a public screening yet. So yeah, I can't really give any insight in terms of that. But I would just say it's really valuable to go to film festivals and to network, meet people, and get inspired as well.
We've had a question through that's sort of related to that. So anybody who wants to chime in, feel free to answer. It's from Dorothea. And they say that, well, I'll just read the whole question. Say, hello, thank you for this brilliant talk. I'm a TV runner and aspiring filmmaker with a few short self-funded documentaries under my belt. And what I find incredibly challenging is sourcing funding for the films I'd like to make. Can you possibly share some wisdom on that front? Is the festival the best route to meeting and networking with potential funders? Thank you. So, Catherine spoke a little bit about you never know who you're going to meet at a party. And Ashley, again, met an exec through sort of networking. Well, actually, no, you reached out to them cold, so that's different. But yeah, there are different ways to meet people who might be able to make your film possible. So yeah, if there's any advice that you could share with that person, that would be great. Any of you? Yes, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say definitely agree with Catherine. Free drinks are the place to be if you want to start networking with people. But I know that sort of speaking on the other side of the fence with like a programming hat on, it's definitely great to come to Q&As. In fact, events a lot like these where you can listen to people. And I kind of find that the best way to make these conversations is literally to chat to people after the Q&A. You just have to come, be prepared to be chatty, you know. But
well, on that note, at the end of the talk, I'll give you guys an opportunity to share any ways people can get in touch with you, seeing as you've offered that up now, so you have to do that. But yeah, if there's any other questions about funding, excuse my doorbell ringing. Yeah, Catherine, and then Agustina.
Related to funding as well, I would just say to the person who asked that question to think of films that he or she has seen that are similar, and to then look at who funded those films, because that's actually how I contacted my producer in the end. I watched a film which was made in the Balkans and contacted someone, and it had a similar kind of tone and sensibility. So then I that's how I got in touch with my producer, and that's in the end how we got funding.
That's really useful. Agustina.
Hi. I think that at least for us, and like back down in the south, the possibility of co-producing or finding distributors in other countries, it's very helpful, and that's something you get in festivals, like international partnerships. So I find that is very important, and also like maybe it's not money, but it's, I don't know, you can find a musician or someone that makes your team, and that opens the door for another country's founding, and I found that very useful.
I think that's really smart advice to kind of not necessarily see funding as somebody who can wave a wand and be the magic ticket to your film being made, and to sort of see your potential collaborators as people who will have their own connections that can then also help the process more generally. I'm conscious that we're kind of coming towards the end of time, so I wonder if it would be nice if each of you could go around and share one piece of key advice for first-time filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, people who are sort of early on in their career and hungry to catch a break, but maybe haven't managed that yet. If we can start with Ashley, that would be great.
Sure. I think if I look back at my career, I think like at every kind of point where I've had an opportunity to do something, there's been like another person kind of who's kind of opened that gate, and I think champions and having people who are supporting you and looking out for you is like one of the most important things in kind of stepping forward and getting good opportunities. And I think you just do that by reaching out to people and talking to people. I think like when I first started in TV, I think like the idea of networking was like a really scary, intimidating thing. And I think what I wish I knew was that it doesn't like need to be like that. I think sometimes it does take a bit of confidence to just like approach someone who you don't know. But if you can kind of get over that, really it's just about kind of building a relationship with someone who like is also like really into filmmaking like you, and hopefully you're going to be wanting to talk to people who like similar things that you want to make and that you like their work. And so just try and form relationships with people kind of based on that kind of shared kind of interest, and try not to be too intimidated by networking. And I think it also is not something that like pays off like, you know, immediately or next month, and you might meet someone and they might not pay off for like 3 or 4 years, but you stay in touch, and that is how it works. And so just like genuinely just forming good connections with people who you are interested in and who are interested in you, I think is the best way to kind of make sure you've got those relationships that will kind of pay off in like opportunities later down the line.
That's really useful, thank you. I'm going to go to Dan next because there's another question for you, and then you can share your juicy tidbit of advice. There's the question comes from someone called Jamie, and they said to you specifically, Dan, what would be your advice for aspiring self-sufficient filmmakers?
That is a very good question, and what I'm always asking myself what to do. But I would say my best bit of advice would be to work with the people that you know already. For the film that I made, that was very self-sufficient. I was working my DOP. I mean, I call her DOP. She's a mate, Marie. I knew her already. The person who played the music, Ollie, I'd known since childhood. I edited it myself. I had one of my mates act as a production assistant, which was just helping me drive around places. But yeah, I think my best bit of advice is work with the people that you know, and also don't be too ambitious, because realistically you're not going to pull off that explosion drone shot, whatever, you know. Got to be real with it. But I guess, like, as a general piece of advice, is you need to work out how to deal with rejection. I think that's a very important thing. Like, obviously you see a lot of people who have a lot of visible success, but there's also a lot of invisible failure. So I think the important thing is to know that if you get rejected, that doesn't mean that your idea is a bad idea. It might not fit because they have an idea like it, or because they don't have enough funding, whatever. But yeah, to get over rejection and persevere. That's quite a good bit of life advice in general, but specifically with filmmaking, yeah.
I think it can be sort of easy to get dispirited, no matter like what your sort of what your role is in this kind of industry. And I think you're absolutely right, Dan, to point out that it can look very glamorous and easy when you're kind of at the stage of presenting something in as a finished product, and people don't see the kind of sweat and agony that's gone into it. And so it's important to embrace all those parts of the process. I think that's really good advice. Agustina, would you like to give your one piece of advice for aspiring filmmakers or early career filmmakers?
Well, maybe to take all the advices, all the tips that will come, but never forget like why you started doing films, because it's tricky, you know, when you get to like festivals, and sometimes you forget why you started. And I think that for films to keep on being powerful, you need to always like take a lot of care of that, like just preserve it. It's okay what I said, like it's understandable.
Yes, I think it's understandable and incredibly prescient, to remember the reasons for you know, putting all that hard work in and going on the journey in the first place. And really, you know, the root of that is storytelling. What stories do you want to tell? Whose stories do you want to tell? And how do you want to tell them? And how can you do those stories justice? I think that's really important. Catherine.
I would kind of like synthesize a lot of what other people have said, and I was going to say something similar to what Dan had said, which is basically you have to have tenacity. That's what somebody told me, and it's so true. You have to keep going, and you have to be single-minded, but also kind of following on from what Agustina said is like maybe also to think about what you enjoy, like just enjoy it. Like if you're getting some knockbacks, don't let that upset you. Just keep writing, keep developing your ideas, and you have to believe in what you want to do. You have to have a vision, and you have to be single-minded. So I would just say, yeah, don't be put down. Don't feel too upset if you get rejected, because that's a natural part of it. It doesn't come easily, but also just try and focus on why you're doing it, where this came from, and just, yeah, be creative.
And Elena, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think this one kind of directed to you know, maybe more people working in that kind of traditional telly trajectory. Just lots of doing, which you don't always get to do when you're working a kind of a more rigid role, but just experimenting with, you know, music, light, pictures, and whatever you can get your hands on feasibly at all. This is something I wish I'd done earlier when I started out, because I feel like doing that really helps you find your voice a little bit earlier, but also gives you a lot of confidence to talk about all that huge gamut of things you need to be on top of as a, you know, producer, director, filmmaker generally. And the more you've already tried doing that, I think the more you might try new things, experiment, produce more interesting, creative things, and have the confidence to do that.
Thank you. I hope that was useful for people listening. The session is going to be available as a recording on the Doc player. So if you have access to this talk, I'm sure you'll have access to the player, and I think that will be uploaded imminently within the next few days. And maybe it's worth referring back to some of the things that we've talked about. It's pretty hard to create or pull out a kind of common narrative when everybody's stories and journeys are so different, but hopefully hearing a little taste of all of those different stories is a kind of encouragement for people to realize there's not one wrong or right way to do something, and that with enough grit you will make your films. I want to say thanks again to DocFest, thanks to BAFTA, thanks to all of our brilliant panelists. And yeah, I hope that that anybody who is sort of looking for their big break, I hope you stay tight, sit tight, and that you get it soon. And yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.